Good evening, konbanwa, buenas noches, bonsoir, and I am your host, Super Kami Guru Alucard. You are here tonight to watch another episode of me counting down my 500 favorite songs. Now, this is just my opinion, as I always state at the beginning of a lot of these other episodes, just for the sake of sharing, different ideas from different genres and how I would rank them if I had my own sort of system. Now, every song is by a different artist, so you'll get a lot of different, unique artists in this list. And I think it's been really cool to do this. I mean, I apologize for the delay in the episodes. I've been recording with my band like gangbusters on the side. I actually have 5 mastered albums now, and our debut is going to be released January 1st. So now that that's finally settled, I have more time to do the show, to do these episodes, and finish off this last 200. So tonight we will count down from 200 all the way to 151. And after that, 150 more to go, and you will all get closer to hearing what my 100 favorite songs are. So I hope you'll enjoy the presentation. Shout outs to Heather, Amy, Steven, and all the other people who watch. David, I don't know if you've actually gotten to check it out yet, but shout outs to you. Shout outs, of course, to the SOS Brigade Orchestra, the SOS Brigade Trio, Quartet. We've evolved, we've jumped around with many different members, so I guess it all applies. But shout outs to Byron, John, and Andrew, everybody else who's helped along the way. And here we go, starting now at 200. Number 200 goes to the king of rock and roll himself, Elvis Presley, with his song Bossa Nova Baby. Now, this is a classic song from his film Fun in Acapulco, and with the classic influence of the old jazz influence, the roots, and even the Latin sounds too. It's a really interesting song because you don't often get to hear the king in this kind of setting, but it's really groovy, it's fresh, and some people say his acting was very cheesy, but I actually felt that he did a lot better acting in this one than some of his other films, for example. But this overall as a piece of musical history is kind of unique because he was influenced by a lot of older music that came before him. Like, that's why he covered songs like My Baby by Little Walter. He was influenced by the blues and jazz and Latin sounds because that's what came before rock and roll. That's what helped to shape it. So the king goes back to his early roots and sounds with that one, and it's really good because when he does that, he really sounds sometimes at his best too. 199 goes to the rap group D12 with their song Revelation. Now, this group was formed by Eminem with a few other people like Proof, Bizarre, Swifty McVeigh, Con Artist, and Kaniva. Now, they're all really good rappers, and like, even though Eminem is the most famous, he kind of has most of the spotlight. A lot of people do focus sometimes on Proof and D12. I like this song in particular because each member of the group, each rapper, all of them, they all have a unique story, they all have a different style, and they all get to actually rap on this, unlike some of their songs. And each one sort of becomes a character in this really sort of real depiction of what life could be like growing up, like in many different kinds of situations. Whether you're in a good upper class upbringing, whether you're stricken with poverty, it's like it all has its shares of struggles. And they kind of give you the perspectives from each of the different classes, as well as, like, Eminem showing what it would be like for a white person versus the rest of them being black. You get like a whole bunch of different perspectives, and that's kind of what makes Revelation, in my opinion, their best song. And that's why it's 199. 198 goes to Solange Knowles with her song T.O.N.Y, also spelled like in the video credits, etc., as T.O.N.Y. And it actually seems through the chorus that she's saying it's an acronym for the other night, why. And it's a very unique song. In fact, actually, it kind of shows what a great singer and songwriter she truly is. It was produced by a lot of the same people who worked with CeeLo Green, so it's got a really soulful, funky sound to it. The whole record that was on actually does. It's great. But and it's sad too because she did the theme song for the Proud Family. She's Beyonce's sister, but because Beyonce's such a mega star, I feel like Solange never got really her like fair due because it's just hard to compete with her big sister. Although I was happy to see in Rolling Stones they did credit her as having one of the 500 greatest songs, and songs like this one too I think proved that in some ways she's actually a better overall artist when she shines her brightest. 197 is Little Walter with his song My Baby. Oddly enough, I was just talking about this because Elvis covered it, but the original version, it is worth mentioning as like one of my 500 favorites because I love his harmonica solo on it. Actually, Little Walter, sadly, he died very young. In fact, it was a struggle to even pay for his grave and his headstone. A few musicians had to chip in and everything. Even fans had to make donations. But they consider him, and this is why it's so sad, they consider him the greatest harmonica player of all time, meaning he could play it better than anybody else. And on songs like My Baby, you can see it's true. That's why Muddy Waters hired him as his harmonica player, and he worked with a lot of other people like Howlin' Wolf, Willie Dixon, because he really was the greatest, not only of the time at his instrument, but perhaps of all time. In fact, when they made the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, he was actually one of the first people they inducted because from blues and jazz we get rock and roll, and Little Walter's sort of like a grandfather to it in that regard. 196 goes to Queen's rapper 50 Cent with his song Many Men. Now, he actually has some really good songs, and I'm not even talking about like the big mainstream club hits like In the Club and Candy Shop that everybody knows him for, that he's kind of become this comical poppy sensation of gangster rap. But you actually look at the more deep rooted songs where he's serious and he's actually singing to you in almost a gospel sort of way. And plus, his raps on that are overall very deep, profound. They're like scripture from the Bible, even I would say, like very witty too. And it's almost like he's using parables to tell his own story of like life on the street growing up and many people wanting him dead, having to survive many things happening to him, which was true. He had been shot 9 times. So you get the sense of this man has been so close to death from this song, and you get just a deep glimpse of what somebody feeling that would feel like. And 50 Cent really, he gets underrated and he gets underappreciated because of the poppy stuff, but if you actually look at the quality of his music on songs like this, it shows that he really could stand up to the best in several cases. 195 goes to the punk rock group The Clash with their song Should I Stay or Should I Go? Now, this is iconically remembered because the riff, the lyrics, it's just one of those catchy melodies that get stuck in your head. And it's what really cements The Clash as one of the greatest like punk bands and also sort of one of the founders of the genre, because this was in the time of the Sex Pistols, the Ramones. It was very competitive, but there weren't really too many bands. It's just all the bands who did this kind of music were exceptionally good at it. Now, they consider the Sex Pistols to be the greatest of all the punk rock groups. Um, the Ramones would probably fall a close second, and then they always say the Clash. Now, in my opinion, what made the Clash distinct and made them great and unique in their own way is there was almost always a sense of like ska kind of mixed in there, a bit of like influence like the Police even had, like from Caribbean music, and that's what added to the punk sort of vibe to give it a whole new sound that still no other band quite has, and it's remarkable. 194 goes to the Australian singer Kylie Minogue with her song Wow. Now, she's most remembered as actually having a really big hit called Can't Get You Out of My Mind, which was an international sensation. number one all around the world. In fact, it was such a big hit, she never actually equaled the success all around the world with any other song. And that's what's kind of sad. They've over time labeled her as a one hit wonder, but she's continued to release albums and had a lot of major success in Australia. And then with a song like Wow, although this song didn't really do so good in North America, it actually went number one in Australia and number two on the charts in the UK, which is really good. And personally, I actually felt that this was one of her best songs because it does have that typical dance pop style of her music, but what takes it to a new hype, a new sound that makes it incredible, raw, and almost like funk is the guitar in there. The guitar is wild, and it's what really would make you want to start dancing. Like if you were in a club and you heard that guitar, you'd be like, okay, fuck it. I'm getting off my seat. I'll put my drink down. I'm gonna start busting some boots. So for that, it's an absolute jam. 193 goes to the legendary Lord Finesse with his song Hip to the Game. Now, this is a classic masterpiece on one of his last full release sort of efforts. And he had two professional albums. They went gold. He didn't reach platinum. His label dropped him. So, through the distribution of another album and some help from KRS-One, another rapper, he actually managed to release an EP effort, but it was a pretty long EP. It was like quite a few tracks. It had some good guest appearances, and this was one of the songs on it. Now, oddly enough, Mac Miller, he tried to take the beat from this song and use it for a song called like Pizza and Ice Cream or something, and he got sued. Now, I believe that like Lord Finesse actually lost the suit, but the irony of it is that Mac Miller is now dead and Lord Finesse is still kicking. So ultimately, it's like even if Mac Miller was getting paid royalties from Jack and the Beat, he's not getting paid royalties now. Only Lord Finesse is because he's still kicking. So, and overall, Lord Finesse was a great rapper, great producer, and that's what the song cements like very well is that he could kill both of those things incredibly well. And he was also the man who discovered Big L. Not a lot of people realize that either. So, shout outs to Lord Finesse. 192 goes to the British rock group Keane with their song Somewhere Only We Know. It's been covered by Lily Allen and it actually appears on the soundtrack for an animated movie. I think it has something to do with bears. I'm really not sure. I'm not even gonna go into that just because I really don't know. But I will tell you though. I first heard this song because I was friends with this woman from France, and she knew like a lot of European music. And she was an artist and a singer too. She played piano, and she actually covered this song, and that was one of the songs she showed me to kind of show me what she could do. And I recognized right away. I was kind of like, wow, this is a really well written song. Like I kind of want to hear the original. So I looked it up. I fell in love with it right away. And oddly enough, me and this singer, we were both fans of Lily Allen, and then Lily Allen later ended up covering it too. But just the song itself, it's beautifully written, wonderful melody. You go look it up. It's a great song. It's very hard hitting. It's just nice, kind of peaceful music to relax to. 191 goes to Laura Branigan with her 80s pop theme, Self Control. Now, this was the big hit from her debut album, and she actually showed a lot of potential because she had a very bluesy, rocky, raspy kind of voice combined with like the pop vibe. Very interesting, and I mean that guitar riff on that song alone, it is slamming. But unfortunately, the mysterious and sad part of it all is she had done a song for the soundtrack of Flashdance. She made this song, and then oddly enough, it was after she had done the music video, done some work for the record. She went home. I guess she had like a headache or something, too much to drink, that kind of thing. And then she just didn't wake up the next morning. So unfortunately, she passed, and that was all the music she'd ever made was really the debut and then what was on the soundtrack. And I had always wondered that too because that song appeared in Grand Theft Auto Vice City on the soundtrack. I liked it ever since I heard that when I was younger. But what happened to that singer? And then oddly enough, I found out that was one of those celebrities that like passed away. Nobody even realized, kind of thing. And I was like, ah, that makes sense. That's why there's nothing really after Self Control at all. 190 is the old school New Jersey rap crew, Naughty by Nature, with their song Feel Me Flow. Now, this was actually on the album Poverty's Paradise, and the album itself won a Grammy, which, for its time, this was the early introduction of hip hop records even winning Grammys or any sort of artist of that genre of category even getting these kind of awards. So it was a big thing. And overall, start to finish, I will say that entire album is a masterpiece. But the reason I picked this song is they used it in the 8 Mile soundtrack, which is where I first heard it. But also, just in general, like the music video to that song, that beat, the way Tretch is spitting his unique style flow, which he was very good friends with a lot of the big names back in the day. Queen Latifah actually helped discover the rap crew, and he was also good friends with Tupac. He made a few songs with him. But yeah, Tretch himself, he was an incredible lyricist, and then combined with the group's raw production, and you also had KG rapping a bit on it sometimes too. They were just overall an incredible group, and that song is like just them at their peak. So that's why it's a masterpiece. 189 goes to the Japanese pop rock group Bana with their song Chou. Now, not much is really known about this group. All I really have been able to gather is that they were, mixed of Canadians and Japanese people who formed a band to make two songs for the soundtrack of an anime called Witch Hunter Robin, which Canada did the English dub for, and it was actually a really good anime. A lot of our animes are, but what made this group so incredible, and this song, because there was two songs they did Shell and they did Half Pain. In fact, it's kind of sad that the band Bana like disbanded, like it broke apart, because they actually had a very unique sound, very groovy, raw, original, almost like a post grunge kind of sound. And Shell was great because there was a mix of English lyrics with Japanese, same with Half Pain, and they were a very diverse group. Sorry, and it's a shame that we couldn't have got to see them do more work. Like perhaps on other anime soundtracks, they would have done exceptionally well as well. 188 goes to the Gorillaz with their song Clint Eastwood. Now, this was their first big hit, and they've actually never had another song chart as well or do as good business wise commercial success sort of oriented. But they've had a lot of other great songs. In fact, they've been incredibly successful every album in the UK, and that's where they're based. DJ Danger Mouse basically gathered a few other people together to kind of mix a whole different genres in pop. And that's what you get with the Gorillaz. Now, it's cool because they always have like animated music videos because they're like, a mixed band with people sort of all over the grid, all over the map of the world. And it's kind of incredible because they're a mix of so many things. They're so hard to define into one sort of genre. I mean, there's rap, there's rock, there's blues, there's sort of techno, electronica, there's everything. And Clint Eastwood is a perfect example of that. It's got everything as well. And it's a very great song because it's very chill and it kind of shows sort of the evolution of hip hop from the 80s all the way to the 90s, how much it has grown. 187 goes to Jennifer Love Hewitt with her song Bare Naked. Now, oddly enough, she has become a very successful actress. She's appeared in a lot of movies, a lot of shows, but this was the only number one success of a single that ever really became a big thing, and it had a video. She actually managed to release quite a few other albums, I believe 4 solo albums, and a lot of them were all successful in Japan, but this was the only one that internationally became a big thing. And she actually was a very good singer. You could compare her probably to a lot of like your Alanis Morissette's and your early 2000s sort of rock female singer. She had that vibe, that quality, but very distinct too and great in her own way. And oddly enough, like that song, as cheesy and simple as it was, I actually consider it sort of some of the best work of its time because it really kind of tells a very funny story in a very sweet way. And then combined with the melody and the way she sings it, it's actually a really good song. 186 goes to the Canadian rock group The Guess Who with their song Laughing. Now, they have a lot of other great songs like These Eyes, Undone, No Sugar Tonight. The list goes on. But the reason I picked Laughing is because this was actually a very big, significant song for them because they had managed to actually break ground as a Canadian group with this song. Like they were one of the first Canadian groups to really get taken seriously, to make it really big and start charting in America. And this was like the big one that took them to number one too. And it's a simple, sweet, um, very melancholic kind of melody. And I really love it because the way Burton sings with it, backed by the instruments, it's phenomenal because every member in that group really was a top-notch musician. And I guess in such a competitive era, trying to keep up with all the American bands, they really had to be. And that's, some of Canadian rock music at its best. And that's what you'll always remember about their music. It's timeless. 185 goes to the rapper Pharaohe Monch with his song Trilogy. Now, not a lot of people are actually aware of him as much after Organized Confusion, which was a duo he had with Prince Poe. And unfortunately, they broke up after a few albums, which were really good, had songs like Stress that were great. And then he released a debut album called Internal Affairs. Now, his debut single, Simon Says, actually used a sample of the Godzilla theme illegally. So because that got pulled, same with the album, it kind of shortchanged his debut career as a solo album, like artist, right? But then he came back with his second album, and that's what had Trilogy on it. Quite a few other really great songs like When the Gun Draws too. But Trilogy was special because it was the first time I've ever seen a rapper have like a three-part story where the beat changes up and he really gives you sort of a crazy sort of vibe that you would hear in like progressive rock but never really in hip hop, which kind of makes him a genius. And he really is the Pharaoh for that reason. 184 goes to the Toots and the Maytals with their song Pressure Drop. Now, this song's been used in commercials, and they had quite a few other really great songs like Funky Kingston, Sweet and Dandy. Very good group. Actually, one of the first reggae groups, which, if you really look at it, it's them sort of pioneering the sound from the roots of calypso music, combined with American music like jazz and pop. And then you have people like Jimmy Cliff, who was like the lead star of The Harder They Come, that helped to shape this genre that we now call reggae. And then from there, we would get your Bob Marley's, your Yellow Man's, your Snows, even all the way up the line, your Vibes Cartel, even. But they are really pioneers of reggae because they started the sound before anybody, them and Jimmy Cliff in that movie The Harder They Come. And Pressure Drop, that's why it has that timeless sound of, okay, that's what a reggae song sounds like. That's the beat you usually expect to hear because they really set the tone of exactly what almost every reggae song follows. At least you would say probably about 50% of what the reggae standards would follow is based on their original rhythms. 183 goes to SN small o capital W with Sakasama no Chou. Just so we don't get confused it with the other snow later on the line. Now they're actually a group that they're in Japan based. They're very good. They have a wonderful female vocalist. They kind of mix alternative rock with a lot of electronic elements, which gives them a very distinct sound. Now, I love this song in particular. The reason I picked it is because it means inverted butterfly. It heavily influenced me, actually inspired one of my own songs called Kuroi Namida and the Negativity. But I first heard it on the soundtrack to the anime Hellgirl, which great anime, really crazy, interesting story. In fact, I really wanted to look into the mystery. I did several times because just the idea of the show is kind of fascinating. Um, Great soundtrack. Actually, they did a lot of the other music for the show, but this song always stood out as sort of the masterpiece, the classic that really showed, oh damn, this show's got an awesome band making the theme songs. 182 goes to the super rap group Gravediggaz with their song Diary of a Madman, featuring Shabazz the Disciple and Killer Priest. Now, they actually all were tight because RZA, who was in Gravediggaz, formed it after he sort of took a break from Wu-Tang Clan for a while other members worked on their solo projects. So him, RZA, which he became the RZA, and then he got another cat, Too Poetic, which became the Grim Reaper, and Fruquan from Setsasonic, an old rap school group, and that became the Gravediggaz, and he actually became the gatekeeper. And Prince Paul from De La Soul, the main producer, he became um, the one they called the Undertaker. So that was the original group, and then Shabazz and Killer Priest were affiliates. Now they severed ties because of a dispute with their own records later on, sadly, but they were incredible in their own guest appearances as well as showing like the greatness of the Gravediggaz at their peak before Too Poetic passed and RZA left the group. But check out them, they're incredible, and that's where I'll leave it. 181 goes to the Mills Brothers and their duet with Louis Armstrong, In the Shade of the Old Apple Tree. Now, this song is really great because it shows what an awesome quartet these guys really were. Because it was crazy because just the four of them alone, one of them had a guitar. He actually was the first one to die in the group, and it was kind of a big blow to them, especially because the peak of their success was the original four brothers. But they had a great sound harmony wise, and then they could even improvise and sound like instruments. So that kind of made them very distinct as a quartet. And then of course you had Louis Armstrong actually accompanying them on this song, singing with them and playing trumpets. So it's fantastic because you really get to hear them at their best, plus Louis in his early prime days as well. And classic masterpiece from Mills Brothers. 180 goes to the former Commodores member Lionel Richie and his song All Night Long. Now this is that 80s group, very funky, soulful. Just gotta love it, really. Like it's a jam. I think I love the full version too that would appear on the records because it has all those wonderful solos from the steel drums, the horns, and just takes it to a whole nother level. Like it's just really one of those jams that as it goes on, everybody just could dance more intensely and really groove to. He sings very wonderful to it, which that's why he was the big star in the Commodores, and probably why he did have a lot of success even solo when he left the group. Songs like this kind of cement it, and they show like, damn man, when Lionel's in the studio, he could make it a party with his voice and the music accompanying him. You know what I mean? So, great song. 179 goes to the 60s rock group, the Rascals, with their song Good Lovin'. Now, it's one of those songs that it's like people might not even know who the Rascals are. They might not even realize that's the title of the song, but it's a song almost everybody's heard that's just got that infectious, catchy chorus that gets stuck in your head. Wonderful guitar work, and plus, it's very well noted for being one of the first ever rock and roll examples of like false stops to basically make the song sound like it's ending before it's ending as sort of a pause, which they were the first rock group to really pioneer that into the sound by doing that in the song. And it's very interesting the way they do it because of the hype, catchy chorus. Like, it just is keeping you on your toes the whole time, so you never really know when the song's gonna end. But yeah, very great. It's just kind of sad that they couldn't have had more success with other songs as big as that one. But that seems to be the big hit that everybody remembers them for. 178 goes to Mike Geronimo, an old school rapper, and his song Master IC. Now, basically, you break that down, it's MIC, the mic. He's basically giving you the formula of what it takes to be a really good rapper. And he had a very interesting, unique style. He freestyled everything. In fact, actually, it was Biggie who heard him first and kind of put him on to Diddy, who helped him get some deals and start making his own solo records, which his own original debut album was his masterpiece. And he's one of those really undercredited rappers who actually went on to do guest appearances with a lot of other rappers too. Now, what makes Mike Geronimo so great on this song is it's got one of the most mysterious, groovy, dark, almost otherworldly sounding beats. And then what he raps is simple, but it's complex enough. It shows you he means business. And that's why, like, it really shows he should get so much more credit as a rapper. Master IC. 177 goes to jazz trombonist and composer Glenn Miller with his composition In the Mood. Now, this is one of those memorable masterpieces of jazz history, which it's sad the way his career didn't really have much success in the early beginnings, and then when it started to pick up, it was right around World War II. He went away to help with the war effort, and then his bomber actually mysteriously disappeared, went down, no one knows. And he was such a great artist who never really got much credit or appreciation or acceptance, even in the jazz world early on, until he started to expand his band a little bit, incorporating more simple swing related melodies. In fact, that's why they say he's sort of like the godfather of swing, because he really brings swing full circle from all the eras it had passed through, from when it began with like Duke Ellington and Louis Armstrong all the way to the 40s. And it's just sad that he couldn't have gone on to do more work, but you check out any of his music, it's timeless. Everybody has heard his pieces, and most of the time they don't even realize it. 176 goes to Japanese pop singer Ayumi Hamasaki with her song Dearest. Now, I first heard this in the Inuyasha soundtrack, and it's a very beautiful ballad, mostly driven by the piano, very simple, light drums, strings accompanying it, and it's beautiful. And I can understand why she is one of the most successful Japanese artists of all time. Like, she has sold over 80 records, and it's because she's really got the voice to belt it out. Like an incredible pop singer, but even as powerful as an opera singer at times. And I mean, the song is very deep. It had a very successful music video, and plus, being in the soundtrack in Inuyasha, that probably helped propel this to be one of her biggest international hits, because this was one of the first times that a Japanese artist, because of the soundtrack, actually had a #1 hit in North America. So she was one of the first artists to ever do that, and for that reason, she's kind of like the legendary pop queen of Japan. 175 goes to the rock band Iron Maiden with their song 2 Minutes to Midnight. Now, they have a lot of other really great songs, Run to the Hills, Number of the Beast, but the reason I chose 2 Minutes to Midnight is because that song has such a deep, poetic, and mysterious nature that I think often gets overlooked, because they had such crazy, dark, drastic examples of metal, like 80s metal, thrash metal even. And you look at the way their vocalist was so operatic. Often people focused on the group for their image and for their sound, and not really even understanding just the depth of sometimes the even more simpler songs. Like, Run to the Hills is actually a great example of this because most people focus on the big highlights like Number of the Beast, but 2 Minutes to Midnight, as simple of a song as it is, it really shows the band playing some of their best. Like, it's catchy, but it's also incredibly structured as far as melody, chords, and rhythm. So they were actually a very phenomenally skilled band too, is what the song shows. 174 is Curtis Mayfield with his song Move On Up. Now, I picked this song because it's a prime example of jazz bridging into soul. It's very well done, especially the full version. Like, if you sit and listen just to the whole composition where the whole band is really playing along with him, he does some great singing. And oddly enough, what makes him special and unique as an artist, not a lot of people know this, but he actually tuned his guitar backwards. It's because he played differently, different handed. So when he was taught how to tune the guitar, he was taught the regular ways instead of how he should do it because it's different for him. So because of that, when he played guitar, he always had a very unique, distinct sound. And you don't hear it as much on this particular song. You do hear quite a bit of it in parts, but mostly it is a really uplifting jazz group. But definitely a masterpiece, which shows too what a great songwriter and lyricist as well as singer he was. 173 is the old school rapper AZ with his song Give Me Yours featuring Nas, who does the chorus. What I love about this song is the beat is produced by Pete Rock. It's very trippy, it's dark, it's jazzy, almost otherworldly sounding too with the piano in the background, and then Nas' sort of trippy chorus really ties it together. But what AZ raps is incredible because if you actually listen to the way he's stemming ideas from when he first rapped on Life's a Bitch with Nas for his album, he's actually almost continuing the story as if that's why Nas is rapping the chorus on this song. Whereas AZ rapped the chorus on Life's a Bitch. So it's kind of like they're switching roles on this song. And AZ actually gets two verses. They do rap together on that album, which was called Do or Die. It's regarded as a hip hop masterpiece, but this song always stood out to me as one of AZ's best because he doesn't worry about the chorus because Nas has got that. The beat is tight, and he just focuses on lyrics, which makes him one of the greatest lyricists in all of hip hop ever. 172 goes to L7 with their song Pretend We're Dead. Now, this is a post 90s grunge sort of rock song that I first heard in San Andreas, and it's really got like that 90s alternative rock sound to it, like even a Soundgarden, Jane's Addiction kind of vibe. Really good song though, because it's even got a punky edge, and it's sad that I never really heard much else from the band, but this is one of those timeless very memorable songs from the 90s that I could say you hear it too. It's really great because it takes you back to that era, and it's kind of a funny mockery of society, like sort of that punk image of if they want us to like be controlled and be managed by society, oh, we'll just pretend we're dead, we'll do our own thing, we'll be in our own world. And it's very interesting because you hear a lot of that sort of ideology in the 90s, and L7 really personified it with this song. 171 goes to the female rapper Foxy Brown with her song If I. Now, this one came out on her debut album Il Nana. Now, this was a really great album start to finish. It's when she had basically made a few records with the likes of LL Cool J, Jay-Z, who was actually her boyfriend at the time, and through that got her own sort of deal. Now, she was the hot female on the streets because she actually debuted sort of as a female rapper on the scene and actually had some pretty well-known hits even before Lil' Kim. So she was a kind of pioneer in that sense. And what makes If I a really great song is she almost sings the voice and the vocals of the chorus in a very haunting almost way. She's rapping but almost singing it very haunting. And then she's telling the story of like sort of regrets in the past of somebody she loved that had basically been killed by street violence, and she regrets that she couldn't be there, but she basically learns from the experience to grow and always be loyal and be around those she cares for. So it's actually a very deep and profound song. Probably one of the most deep, profound songs I've ever heard any female rap. And to the point, it's better than some male shit. Like, for reals, it's good. 170 goes to the 90s rock band Jane's Addiction with their song Been Caught Stealing. Now, this song, another one I heard in San Andreas, I love it, classic rock tune. And this was actually back when the group had like their original lineup with guitarist Dave Navarro still intact. And what makes the song great too is they had a very distinct sound to them. Like you hear it with this song, it sounds very bluesy, very upbeat, almost kiddie like at times. But it captures the essence of the song, almost feeling like a guilty kid who's sort of up to mischief and got caught stealing. And they really captured the idea of the story very well. And then musically, like I said, it bridges so many different elements of other music before it that it really doesn't sound like any of your other sort of grunge bands of the time, like Nirvana or Pearl Jam. Like Jane's Addiction had a distinct sound that really set them apart, especially with songs like this. 169 goes to Nana Se Aikawa with her song Owarine Yume. Now, this song is another Inuyasha soundtrack I heard that I really love the song because it's very rocky, bluesy, mixed with Japanese pop, and it's incredible the way she ties the story using romaji and even katakana together with the poetry of her original Japanese text. Now, she is a very iconic and heavily influential artist over there, as well as successful. But you hear her sound influence like the later generations of Japanese pop rock singers, like even people like Anna Tsuchiya, Olivia Lufkin, and even Neo from the band Maximum the Hormone. You even hear a touch of that. Like her sound became very universal for Japanese pop mixed with rock, and you even hear it as far as baby metal. So she's very iconic for songs like this too, of course. 168 is Tom Petty with his song Running Down a Dream. Now, this is one of those classic songs that you just feel like if you were driving and you were going on a long trip, you would want this playing if it was a bright sunny day and you were cruising down the road. And oddly enough, it is in San Andreas, which I've done that. That's why I could tell, like, you know what, if you were really driving in real life, this would be good driving music. But it's a really simple tune he sings. It's nice. Got some really great guitar on it. The solos, even the riff itself, that the main riff it runs on, is quite catchy, and it's just got a really driving groove to it. And I mean, he's done a lot of other songs that are very famous. He even worked with the Traveling Wilburys with Roy Orbison and shit. So he always was a very good artist, like, and especially when he had his own band and started doing his own thing, he really made a dent because he personified taking the roots of blues and bringing them into the modern, the classic hard rock, and having the perfect balance of the two. 167 is Large Professor with his song LP Surprise. Now, this song was on the album Professor at Large, which was his comeback after a very long hiatus to the music industry. He had mostly been producing for artists like Cormega and stuff after the collapse of his original hip hop group Main Source, which him and a few other DJs basically led. After that basically met its demise, he produced for Nas for a bit, Cormega, a few artists like that, and then he finally got some material together with some of his old school colleagues like Mike Geronimo, Granddaddy YU, Tragedy Gaddafi, Cormega, all the greats that he had worked with basically came back for the new record. And What was phenomenal about the album Professor at Large, it came out in 2012, but yet it sounds like a perfectly put out there in the 90s kind of album. And it's a classic. And LP Surprise, I mean, the way he references the old with the new, it's just perfect. It's a masterpiece of hip hop for all time, old school and new. 166 is Reba McEntire with her song I'm a Survivor. Now, she's had a lot of success, a lot of great songs throughout a very long career, as well as quite a decently successful acting career, such as movies like Tremors and even her own sitcom, which was very funny and on for quite a while. She did a lot of songs I love too, like The Night That the Lights Went Out in Georgia. That's another really good one, especially the bass on that one. It's groovy. But what I love is she doesn't sound like the typical country singer, and you hear that on songs like I'm a Survivor too. You hear that Reba as an artist really has the range of just a really great artist, very wide. It could sort of jump into other genres and merge simultaneously and still have the roots of what she's trying to sing from, which is the heart and soul of her country music. And she's an incredible artist, and she continues to make great music. As I've heard, she dropped an album maybe a few years ago. It was very good. So let the legend live on. 165 is the Ghetto Boys with their classic hip hop song, My Mind is Playing Tricks on Me. Now, this song is great because originally it was supposed to just be a Scarface solo of the group, because the group was originally founded of Willie D, Scarface, and Bushwick Bill, who's actually only 3'8". He's very short. In fact, recently, when they were making that album around that time, which is why the cover has them in the hospital carrying Bushwick to the emergency, and he's got the patch over his eye. It's all bloody because he had actually gotten shot in the eye during the drunk altercation. The gun went off, and basically he lost his eye for that reason. He didn't die, he did survive, but they didn't know if that was going to be the last time he was ever on record. So they took that picture, and because of that experience, the record producer thought, you know what, let's get Willie D rapping a verse in Bushwick too, because they both went through some really crazy stuff. Their minds are probably eating away at them too. Scarface still gets two verses because it was intended to be a solo, but each of them get their own spin on it, and it's really what shows the Ghetto Boys were probably not only the best group of the South of their time, but just one of the best old school rap groups of all time. 164 goes to King Crimson with their song, The Court of the Crimson King. Now, the cover of the album, which the title track basically comes from, it was made by an artist who actually died very young, and that was one of the only pieces of art he actually got to publish and really ever get to see the light of day. And it's a masterpiece because what makes them such a unique group of progressive rock groups of the time too, you compare them with Genesis and Yes and all those sort of things. Like, that's why you even would have members from this going on to form Asia with a lot of those other groups. But what made them distinct is they weren't afraid to throw sort of the rock rule book out the window and really go back to traditional, even British sounds with pipes and horns, and almost making it sound like you really were in a court filled with jesters, more so than like listening to a rock concert. And for that reason, that's what makes them like the pioneers of classic progressive rock, is they had a sound like nobody had then, and still nobody has to this day. 163 is Cassiopeia with their song Midnight Rendezvous. Now, they are actually a Japanese instrumental acid jazz rock funk group, and basically they've composed a lot of music throughout the years, gone through many different members, and they've become an international phenomenon on the internet, like as far as later generations, because their music's becoming more rediscovered and seeing the light of day, that it just was not like the big international success it was in its like early original releases. But as I say, they became very successful because they did a lot of jingles for the subway music around the trains of Tokyo. So their music kind of became iconic, generating revenues from that, and always like having that sound of Tokyo forever embedded in sort of their like history. And then you hear that like people, they rediscover their music, it gets revived on the internet, so they become a very crazy sort of phenomenon of Japanese like instrumental rock jazz music. And songs like Midnight Rendezvous really show like these instrumentalists are just masters of what they do, the same way you would have your Django Reinhardts, you'd have your Charles Mingus, your Charlie Parkers, all that. Like, they are masters at what they do too. 162 goes to Olivia Lufkin with her song Wish. Now, I first heard on the Nana soundtrack, which is great anime. I definitely recommend anybody check it out if you're into anime. But what makes this song so wonderful is it does have a mix of a little English, but it's mostly Japanese. But it's really Olivia Lufkin does a lot of the ballads in the show, like because she mainly singing the character Rayra's songs. They're more the softer songs, you notice. But this is probably the hardest rocking jam of all the songs you hear in the show from like their sort of group Trapness, basically the way the story centers around. And what makes it great is the song talks about having a wish and fighting for it, and because of that really hard driven like guitar riff that drives the beat, you really get the sense like you gotta fight for what you want, for what you're wishing for. And it really goes with sort of the second theme song of the show and the animation, and that's why I'm like, yeah, that's a solid song for sure. 161 goes to Lupe Fiasco with his song Superstar. Now, Lupe first got discovered by Kanye West on the song Touch the Sky, and that's when he sort of made his big record debut. And he's been compared to people like Jay-Z because he's worked with him, and Kanye too, and even rappers like Common because he has a very positive sense to the way he raps. Even one of my old mentors, Rich Green, credited him as an influence. And I could see why, because there's something cool about Lupe that he doesn't really need to copy any other rapper styles. He just sort of fits in with a lot of the great rappers of his era because he has a natural coolness about it, which his album title suggests too. And you hear songs like Superstar, he's got everything he needs to have a major hit. And it seems like with his career, it's only gotten bigger and bigger hits as it goes on. So always wish Lupe the best. 160 is singer and drummer of Genesis, Phil Collins, with his song In the Air Tonight. Now, Phil Collins made so many great songs. Not only solo, plenty of fantastic records solo, but I mean, he also made some great songs with the band Genesis, and that's what he had actually originally started out with. And you hear songs like In the Air Tonight, which was later on in his career. He'd already made several albums with Genesis and even had begun to assume the lead vocalist role in the band. But that was when he first stepped out as like a solo artist. And it was things like this that would later inspire other like rock instrumentalists to step out as lead vocalists too, like people like Robert Plant, and go solo without the band. And the success of this is probably why he went on to do so many other solo albums, because it had become equally as comparable with Genesis in many ways, but it had become Phil's own unique sound, and that's why there's still nothing quite like this song to this day. 159 is The Who with their song My Generation. Now, as it's probably well known, Keith Moon, their drummer, was one of the greatest drummers ever. He died before his time, and they overall had to deal with a lot of setbacks and struggles, member changes throughout the years, different vocalists, different writers, often taking different roles in the band. They composed a lot of great classic music. Now, this was them very early on in sort of the prime of their youth, their old original sort of lineup. And you hear sort of almost that early roots like of Black Sabbath, the Kinks, Led Zeppelin, and all the shit that would later evolve into like what we would call punk rock. you hear that in my generation. You hear exactly where rock and roll is heading. Like their generation is shaping what will be rock and roll in the modern era. And it's just a classic timeless song that really shows the Who at their best. 158 goes to the legendary MC Big L with his song Devil's Son. Now, I picked this song even though it was not officially released ever on a record because it was considered too controversial, a bit too dark, and actually, some of the lyrics were changed from what he originally had written because the producer's like, okay, Al, just tone it down a tad because you're just taking it a little too far. Because I guess at one point he wanted to say F Jesus Christ, and the producer basically made him say not Jesus Christ. Just say that instead, because it's already hardcore enough. Like, you don't want Christians to like mob your house and set you on fire and actually think you're the devil's son. But sadly enough, he died shortly after that album, right near the end of completing his second one. He had finished the first. That song got cut from the final release because they thought they'd have a bigger shot at promoting his commercial appeal with songs like Put It On and stuff. But that song really shows what a terrifying MC he really was. That he was probably one of the greatest and probably the most fearsome competitor of his era as far as lyrics. 157 goes to Journey with their song Who's Crying Now. Now I love this song because it really has like the epitome of what makes them great as a band. Like all the typical things you expect with a Journey song. Like you hear examples of this in Don't Stop Believing, Wheel in the Sky, things like this. But what makes Who's Crying Now is it has that tad bit of a blues where the lead singer, the vocalist, he could really pour his heart out. Plus the way the bass is grooving on that song, it sets the tone, the atmosphere. The keys are on point because they're very atmospheric as well. And I remember when I first heard that song, like I heard a bunch of other Journey songs, it was the greatest hits I heard, but that one always stood out. I was like, that song I kind of like the best. Like I know everybody has sort of their own favorite, but that with me, I was like, that's the jam, man. That's got everything they need for a hit. Like it's solid. 156 goes to Shaq, yes, the basketball player, featuring Big Pun and Fat Joe with The Bigger They Are. Now, this is a song back when Shaq did a few movies like Kazam and actually put out a few records. Now, he rapped with people like Notorious B.I.G., Nas, Mobb Deep, and of course even Big Pun and Fat Joe, who appear on the song. Now, in the original recording of this, the producer Kool Moe Dee even had a verse too. It didn't get released, but when Shaq did his own version, he did actually finally put it out there for all of mainstream audiences to hear. Now, he was one of the few people that luckily got to rap with Big Pun before he passed, and if I had to guess, Pun probably wrote the predominant amount of lyrics because it's speculated he wrote most of Fat Joe's stuff. And it's known that when Biggie did the song with Shaq, he wrote his lyrics. So I'm going to assume Pun wrote his lyrics there too. Now, it's a really great song because they all kill it. And even Shaq is definitely at the top of his game there too. 155 goes to Kishida Kyodan and the Ake Boshi Rockets with their song HOTD, which is actually from the anime called High School of the Dead. Really good anime. Sadly, the creator actually died before he could finish it. This band did the main opening theme, and then another singer basically did several series of ending theme songs. But this one always stood out, even though this was like one of the few times they actually got to shine. It was a really powerful song, very guitar driven, like 90s blues rock. In fact, there were elements too that reminded me of stuff by like the Cranberries, like with their song Zombie. So it had a really strange, unique quality, but it captured the idea of the song too in many ways. And I actually really loved that song. The show was great too, but the song was absolute masterpiece. 154 goes to the alternative rock reggae group Sugar Ray with their song Words to Me. Now, I first actually heard this, believe it or not, in the Scooby Doo soundtrack when they made the first like live action movie of those, which was pretty funny. But I really liked that song, and I was thinking too when the band started singing it, like in the movie, like, oh, this should be a real song. This is really good. And then, sure enough, it was on the soundtrack, and it was from this alternative rock reggae group called Sugar Ray. And actually, they had quite a bit of success with their first couple records because they had put out a record before that too. And then that song also ended up on their second album. Now, during that first few album run, they were releasing them during the summer. And because of that whole reggae summertime vibe, I think that definitely helped their record sell. Sadly, after that, the band broke up, their success declined, and we never really heard much more from them after that, though. 153 goes to the legendary Art Tatum with his composition of Elegy. Now, this is a classical piece which he does his own jazz stride spin on, and it's incredible because it's like he's playing four different melodies at once, like a four-part harmony, because he has the giant massive hands. And although he is nearsighted, he was such a good skilled technician, probably the most skilled technician at the pianist of all time. It is often regarded so that he could play all these different parts at once that it almost sounded like he would have had four hands on the piano instead of two. And yet he played straight fingered. It would almost look like his hands weren't even moving. Yet he was hitting a million notes at once all over the piano and playing all these different parts of the melody that joined it together to make this almost sound orchestral. And that's why they still regard Art Tatum to this day as probably the greatest pianist to ever live as far as being a technician. 152 goes to the Canadian rapper Shad with his song Brother in brackets Watching. Now, Shad is a Canadian rapper that often, like other rappers like Buck 65, Classified, Chaos, the list goes on, they often get overlooked because of big shots like Drake, who kind of gone to the States and made a bigger name for themselves by selling out and putting out poppy records because they actually had people help them. But you look at a lot of the rappers that really had to strive to get any sort of mainstream success on the commercial scene. Like it even goes as far back to Maestro Fresh West. They had to sort of hook up with some sort of American or international distribution to really get it to reach the mainstream masses. And often they didn't get the success to continue or last very long. This was often the case. And that's why it's sad because Shad, in many ways, was actually getting major success when he made a song called Rose Guard, but yet then he kind of fell off the map too. Still releasing albums underground and incredible as this song, which has very profound socially conscious and positive message suggests, but unfortunately he never reached the success of Drake. He's still doing his thing though, and hopefully one day he'll show who's boss. 151 goes to Men at Work with their song Overkill. Now, they are a great group in the sense they've had a lot of really big hits. They're actually an Australian group. Their lead singer was originally from Scotland, oddly enough, which is cool. But spent most of his life down under in Australia, which why they had the song Down Under, and also had songs like Who Can It Be Now, which were major big hits, all from the first album. Songs like Overkill actually came from their second album, which this was around the time they started to face lawsuits that caused the group to break up. And actually, one of the main instrumentalists that speculated he might have killed himself, or he basically got so depressed that it killed him. And it's sad because the lead singer went solo. He was always a great artist, and songs like this, which he wrote, shows what a great genius Colin Hay was as a guitarist as well as a vocalist and songwriter. And this song, in my opinion, it wasn't so cheesy or too pop. It was probably Men at Work's most profound song, and really shows they were probably just as good, if not better, than many of the other bands of the time because they weren't afraid to try new things with different instruments either. Well, that concludes our 50 for tonight, ending it at 151 with Men at Work's Overkill. Join us next week, now that part 7 is over, of course, where we will continue part 8, and that means only 150 more songs to go. After that, we will reach the last 100, and you'll get to hear the 100 favorite songs of Super Kami Guru Alucard. So, I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Like I always try to remind people, just keep in mind this is my opinion. It's just my examples of different artist songs that I feel deserve a decent amount of credit and praise. So, if you enjoyed this, stay tuned for part 8 and have a good night, everybody. Peace, one love. Oyasumi Nasa.